Marcus Thorne stared at the flickering holographic display showing his account balance. 847 credits. 3 months ago, that wouldn't have bought him lunch at a decent restaurant. Now it represented his entire fortune, the pathetic remainder of what used to be a thriving starship maintenance empire. The rusty Comet auction house buzzed with the usual collection of smugglers, pirates, and desperate souls willing to gamble their last credits on questionable spacecraft. Located in the bowels of Nexus Station, 3 levels below the respectable merchant quarters. It was the kind of place where dreams went to die and fortunes changed hands faster than laser fire. Marcus nursed his synthetic whiskey and watched the parade of deteriorating vessels cross the auction block. A Martian cargo hauler with radiation leaks went for 1,200 credits. A patrol craft missing its navigation array sold for 900. Each sale drove home just how far he'd fallen. "Rough night?" asked the bartender, a heavily scarred woman with cybernetic eyes that glowed amber in the dim light. "Rough life," Marcus replied, pushing his empty glass across the scarred metal surface. "Lost my maintenance contract to Stellar Dynamics 3 months ago. Apparently loyalty doesn't count for much when someone offers to do the job for half price." The bartender refilled his glass without being asked. "You're not the first engineer to get squeezed out by the big corporations. Probably won't be the last either." Marcus had spent 15 years building Thorne Engineering into the most trusted name in independent starship maintenance across the Outer Rim. His team could fix anything that flew, from ancient Earth-built freighters to cutting-edge Andromedan scouts. Then, Stellar Dynamics moved into the sector with their automated repair bays and rock-bottom prices. Within 6 months, his client list had evaporated. Within 8, he'd had to sell his facilities to pay debts. Now he sat in a basement auction house, contemplating spending his remaining credits on a ship he probably couldn't afford to fuel, let alone maintain. "And now for something truly special," announced the auctioneer. A Rigelian whose multiple arms gestured dramatically at the newest display. Lot 77, the Stellar Whisper, a genuine Zephyrian deep space vessel of unknown configuration. The holographic projection showed a ship unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. Where most vessels were angular and utilitarian, this one flowed like liquid metal, its hull covered in intricate patterns that seemed to shift in the light. Even in the grainy projection, it possessed an alien elegance that made his engineer's heart race. "I'll be honest with you folks," the auctioneer continued, his tone dropping to conspiratorial levels. "This beauty's been sitting in impound for 50 years. Previous owner, let's just say they're not in a position to reclaim it. The ship's got some quirks, advanced technology nobody's quite figured out yet. The bidding started at 2,000 credits. Marcus watched it climb. 2,500. 3,000, 3,500. Then something strange happened. The room went quiet. Spacers who'd been bidding aggressively suddenly found their boots fascinating. "Come on, people," the auctioneer urged. "This is Zephyrian technology. We're talking about... You won't find another one this side of the galactic core." But the crowd remained silent. Marcus caught fragments of whispered conversations. ... Heard stories about Zephyrian ships. ... Last owner went missing. 2,000 credits, the auctioneer tried again, desperation creeping into his voice. 1,500. Come on, surely someone recognizes a bargain. Marcus felt that familiar tingling in his chest, the same sensation he'd experienced the first time he'd seen a starship engine come online. This wasn't just a machine, it was something special, something that called to the part of him that understood the poetry of perfectly calibrated systems. 800 credits, he called out, his voice carrying across the suddenly silent room. Every head turned toward him. The auctioneer's face went through several interesting color changes before settling on relieved green. "Did I hear 800 credits from?" the human gentleman. Marcus nodded, his heart pounding. It was financial suicide, but something about that ship demanded attention. Around him, other bidders shook their heads or looked away, as if the vessel itself made them uncomfortable. 800 going once, going twice. ... The auctioneer's hammer hovered dramatically. sold to the brave soul in the back. As the hammer fell, Marcus wondered if he'd just bought his salvation or signed his own death warrant. Either way, he was about to find out what secrets lay hidden in the Stellar Whisper's enigmatic hull. 20 minutes later, he stood at the edge of Docking Bay 94, staring at his new ship and questioning every decision that had led him to this moment. The Stellar Whisper was even more magnificent up close. Her hull seemed to ripple with an inner light, patterns flowing across the surface like living circuitry. Marcus ran his hand along the smooth metal, surprised by its warmth. Most ships felt cold and mechanical, but this one pulsed with something almost organic. The airlock responded to his touch, irising open with a soft musical tone. Inside, bioluminescent strips provided gentle illumination, revealing corridors that curved. In impossible ways, everything felt grown rather than built, as if the ship were a living organism rather than a machine. Marcus made his way toward what he hoped was the engine room, his footsteps muffled by floors that seemed to absorb sound. The ship's architecture defied conventional design. Spaces flowed into each other without clear boundaries, and he could swear the walls were breathing. The engine core was a masterpiece of alien engineering. Crystal formations pulsed with energy, connected by conduits that looked more like arteries than cables. At the center, a massive quantum resonator hummed with barely contained power. It was beautiful, incomprehensible, and completely dead. "All right. Girl," Marcus said, settling his toolkit beside the main control panel. "Let's see what's wrong with you." The diagnostic interface activated at his touch, displaying readouts in flowing Zephyrian script. His universal translator struggled with the alien language, producing fragments of meaning, ... dormant psychoactive ... bonding protocol initialized, awakening sequence pending. Marcus began tracing power flows, looking for the break in the ship's systems. His hands moved with practiced confidence, finding familiar patterns beneath the alien technology. Energy was energy after all, regardless of how it was harnessed. He found the problem in a crystalline relay node hairline fracture that had probably been causing slow power drain for decades. One careful adjustment with his sonic calibrator, and power began flowing through the ship's systems again. That's when everything changed. Lights blazed throughout the vessel. The gentle hum became a symphony of awakening systems. And somewhere deep in the ship's heart, something began to stir. Warning displays activated, showing a chamber Marcus hadn't seen before. Deep in the ship's core, beneath layers of advanced shielding, a cryogenic pod was coming online. The readings showed life signs strong, stable, and distinctly non-human. Revival sequence initiated, announced a melodious voice in accented galactic standard. Subject, Princess Seraphina Kane. Status, awakening from extended stasis. Estimated completion, 3 minutes, Princess. Marcus dropped his tools and ran toward the chamber, his mind racing. What had he gotten himself into? The chamber was a work of art, crystalline walls that refracted light into dancing rainbows, with a central pod that looked more like a flower bud than a medical device. Steam poured from the opening capsule as internal systems worked to revive its occupant. Figure began to emerge from the mist. Tall, graceful, with skin that shimmered like starlight and hair the color of deep space. She was undeniably beautiful. There was something regal and dangerous about her bearing that made Marcus step back instinctively. Princess Seraphina Kane opened eyes like twin galaxies and fixed them on Marcus with an intensity that made his knees weak. "You," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that resonated in his bones, "are not Captain Zorian." "No," Marcus managed, his mouth suddenly dry. "Definitely not. I'm Marcus Thorne. I bought this ship at auction." Seraphina stepped fully from the pod, moving with fluid grace despite having been unconscious for who knew how long. She wore a form-fitting suit that seemed to be made of liquid starlight, and every movement spoke of training and power. "Bought?" Her eyes flashed with something dangerous. "The Stellar Whisper is a royal vessel of the Zephyrian constellation.
Oh.
She cannot be bought or sold." "Well, apparently she can be," Marcus said, pulling out his ownership documents with hands. That shook only slightly. 800 credits bought and paid for, though I'm starting to think I got more than I bargained for. Serafina studied the papers, her expression shifting from anger to confusion to something that might have been despair. 50 years, she whispered. I've been asleep for 50 years, Captain. ... What happened to Captain Zorian? I don't know who that is, Marcus said gently. The ship's been an impound for decades. No one knows what happened to the previous crew. Impound. The word came out like a curse. Then Voss found us. Zorian must have... She straightened, royal composure reasserting itself. Protocols have activated. According to Zephyrian law, ownership of a royal vessel constitutes a marriage contract. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. Marriage, what now? Congratulations, Serafina said, her smile sharp enough to cut steel. You are now bonded to Princess Serafina Kane, last daughter of the Stellar Winds dynasty. The ship and I are bound together where one goes, the other follows. The ship's AI chose that moment to chime in. Bonding confirmed. Welcome aboard, Marcus Thorne. As bonded partner to Princess Serafina, you now have access to enhanced ship functions. Current compatibility rating, 12%. Recommendation. Begin. Relationship building exercises immediately. Marcus stared at the alien princess who was apparently now his wife, at the ship that had somehow become sentient, and at his life that had just taken a turn into complete insanity. This isn't happening, he muttered. Oh, but it is, Serafina replied. And I'm afraid things are about to get much worse. Admiral Draken Voss has been hunting me for 50 years. Now that the ship is active again, he'll know exactly where to find us. As if summoned by her words, proximity alarms began screaming throughout the ship. Admiral Draken Voss stood on the bridge of his flagship Decimator, watching the tactical display with cold satisfaction. After 50 years of searching, the Zephyrian princess who had humiliated him was finally within reach. 3 contacts approaching, announced his tactical officer, a scarred veteran whose loyalty had been bought with promises of plunder. Zephyrian signatures. Sir, it's definitely the Stellar Whisper. Voss's hand unconsciously moved to the scar that ran from his left temple. To his jaw-parting gift from Princess Serafina during their last encounter. She had been 17 then, already showing the warrior spirit that would have made her a valuable ally. Instead, she had chosen to flee rather than accept his marriage proposal, making him a laughingstock among the Zephyrian noble houses. Excellent, he said, his voice like grinding metal. Signal the escort vessels. Today we correct a 50-year-old mistake. On the Stellar Whisper, Marcus was discovering that flying an alien warship while learning about his accidental marriage was harder than it looked. The ship responded to his thoughts as much as his hands, and his current state of panic was not helping matters. Left. Serafina shouted as energy beams lit up the space around them. Bank left and dive. I'm trying, Marcus replied, wrestling. With controls that seemed to have their own ideas about proper flight dynamics, this thing doesn't handle like anything I've ever flown. Because she's not just a ship, Serafina explained, her hands dancing over what appeared to be weapons controls. Zephyrian vessels are partially alive. You must work with her, not against her. Easy for her to say. She wasn't the one trying. To pilot an organic spacecraft through a debris field, while 3 heavily armed cruisers tried to turn them into cosmic dust. The Stellar Dea Whisper shuddered as another volley bracketed their position. Marcus could feel the ship's pain through their strange connection, like a wounded animal crying out in distress. They're hurting us, Serafina observed, studying the tactical display. Voss wants us alive, or at least, he wants me alive. You, I suspect, are expendable. Comforting, Marcus muttered, pulling the ship into a spiraling climb that should have been impossible given their mass. To his surprise, the maneuver worked, the Stellar Whisper moving like a dancer through the deadly light show. You're learning, Serafina said, with what might have been approval. The ship responds to confidence and clear intention. Doubt creates hesitation in her systems. The cum system crackled to life, filled with a voice like grinding stone. Princess. Serafina, your little game of hide-and-seek is over. Surrender now, and I will make the human's death quick. Seraphine's face went cold as the void. Admiral Voss. Still collecting wives through conquest, I see. Were promised to me by your father before his unfortunate accident. I've come to collect what is mine. I belong to no one, she replied, her voice carrying royal authority that could have cut through armor plating. Least of all a usurper who murdered his way to power. Marcus caught the subtext and felt his stomach drop. He killed your father. Voss orchestrated a coup 50 years ago, Serafina explained, never taking her eyes off the tactical display. My father and brothers died defending the throne. I was supposed to be his prize, the last legitimate heir, giving his rule a veneer of legitimacy through marriage. So you ran. I fought. When that failed, I ran. Her hands moved over the weapon's controls with deadly precision. Captain Zorian was my father's most loyal officer. He helped me steal this ship and disappear into the outer territories. Another salvo rocked the ship, this one closer than before. Their pursuers were tightening the net, using their superior numbers to limit the Stellar Whisper's options. Marcus studied the navigation display, looking for options. There, he said, pointing to a swirling mass of energy clouds ahead, the Phantom Nebula, if we can reach it. ... The radiation will interfere with their sensors, Serafina finished, understanding immediately. But the energy storms are deadly. No ship has ever successfully navigated the inner passages. No conventional ship, Marcus corrected. But the Stellar Whisper isn't conventional, is she? For the first time since awakening, Serafina smiled a fierce expression that transformed her face from beautiful to magnificent. No, she is not. Very well, husband. Let us see what impossible things we can accomplish together. The word husband sent an unexpected thrill through Marcus, but there was no time to analyze it. The nebula's edge rushed toward them like a wall of living lightning, its energy patterns more complex than anything in Earth's databases. Voss won't follow us in there, Serafina said as they plunged into the swirling chaos. His ships are too rigid, too mechanical. They cannot adapt to the nebula's changing conditions. And we can. We're bonded to a living ship, Marcus Thorne. She will learn, grow, adapt to whatever challenges we face. Seraphine's hand found his on the control surface. Suddenly Marcus could feel the ship's systems more clearly than ever. Trust her. Trust me. Trust yourself. The Stellar Whisper dove into the Phantom Nebula like a fish returning to water. Around them, reality twisted in ways that made Marcus's instruments scream warnings. But the ship herself seemed to revel in the chaos. Her bioorganic systems absorbed energy from the storms, growing stronger rather than weaker. Behind them, Admiral Voss watched his prey disappear into the deadly maze of the nebula and slammed his fist against the command console.
Sir?
His tactical officer ventured carefully. Should we pursue? No, Voss said after a long moment. Set up a perimeter. They have to come out eventually, and when they do, we'll be waiting. Deep in the nebula's heart, Marcus and Serafina worked together to navigate the impossible, each beginning to understand that their accidental bonding might be the key to survival and, perhaps, something more. The Phantom Nebula was like being inside a living storm. Energy cascades painted space in colors that had no names, while gravitational anomalies twisted reality into impossible geometries. The Stellar Whisper rode the chaos like a surfer on cosmic waves, her bioorganic systems adapting to conditions that would have torn apart any conventional vessel. Marcus found himself thinking less and feeling more, letting instinct guide his hands across controls that responded to emotion as much as technique. Beside him, Serafina moved with fluid grace, her warrior training perfectly complementing his engineering intuition. The ship is learning, she observed, watching power readings that shifted like living things. She's integrating your neural patterns with mine, creating something new. Is that supposed to happen? Marcus asked, banking them around a gravity well that pulsed with malevolent energy. No bonding has ever involved a non-Zephorian before. We are in uncharted territory. She paused, studying his profile as he navigated another impossible turn. You are not what I expected in a husband. Thanks, I think. Marcus couldn't help but smile despite their situation. What did you expect? Someone stronger? More traditionally masculine? Zephyrian males are warriors. They prove their worth through combat and conquest. She tilted her head thoughtfully. You prove yours through understanding and adaptation. It is ... different. The ship shuddered as another energy wave passed through them, but instead of damage, the readings showed improvement. The stellar whisper was actually feeding on the nebula's power, growing stronger with each passing moment. We can't stay in here forever, Marcus said, checking their position against the swirling map of energy currents. Voss will be waiting when we emerge. Then we must emerge differently than he expects. Serafina called up schematics that Marcus had never seen before, weapon systems and defensive measures that had been locked away in the ship's memory banks. The Stellar Whisper was designed as a royal escort, built for speed and stealth rather than direct confrontation. But if we complete the bonding ritual, ... double quotes. What kind of ritual? Marcus interrupted, though he suspected he already knew. Physical union. The sharing of life essence that creates true partnership between bonded pairs. Her cheeks darkened with what might have been embarrassment. It would unlock the ship's full potential, allow her to become what she was truly meant to be. Marcus felt heat rise in his face. Look, you're incredibly beautiful, and in any other circumstances I'd be honored, but we barely know each other. I don't want you to feel pressured into something because of some alien marriage law. Serafina stared at him for a long moment, then did something completely unexpected. She laughed. It was a sound like silver bells in a crystal cave, transforming her stern features into something radiant. Marcus Thorne, she said when she could speak again, you continue to surprise me. Most males would have seized the opportunity without question. Most males are idiots, Marcus replied seriously. If we're going to do this, if we're going to be partners, it should be because we choose it, not because circumstances forced it on us. Something shifted in her expression, a wall coming down that he hadn't even realized was there. In 50 years of sleep, I dreamed sometimes. It's always the same dream of finding someone who would see me as more than a prize to be won, or a tool to be used, someone who would choose me, not my title or my heritage. I did choose you, Marcus said quietly. Maybe not knowingly at first, but every decision since then has been to stay with you, to protect you, to be your partner in this insane situation. The ship around them seemed to respond to their words, lights pulsing in harmony with their heartbeats. The bioorganic systems were already beginning to integrate their neural patterns more deeply, creating connections that transcended mere physical attraction. The ritual doesn't require traditional consummation, Serafina said softly. It requires trust, vulnerability, the willingness to open yourself completely to another being. She moved closer, her hand finding his. Are you willing, Marcus Thorne? Not because law demands it, but because you choose it. Marcus looked into those galaxy-deep eyes and saw not a princess or an alien warrior, but a woman who had lost everything and was offering him her heart despite the risk. Yes, he said simply. What followed was unlike anything in Marcus's experience. Not just physical connection, but something deeper, minds touching, souls intertwining. Two very different beings becoming something greater than the sum of their parts. The ship around them sang in harmonics that resonated through their bones, her systems blazing with power as the true bonding took hold. When it was over, Marcus could feel Seraphine's presence in his mind like a warm light, just as she could. Sense his thoughts and emotions. They were still individuals, but they were also something new, a partnership that transcended species and culture. The compatibility rating is now 100%, the ship's AI announced with what sounded like satisfaction. All systems are fully operational. Combat effectiveness increased by 400%. Welcome to your true potential. Marcus stood on shaking legs, amazed by how different everything felt. He could sense every part of the ship as if it were his own body, could feel Seraphine's warrior instincts complementing his analytical mind. The nebula is clearing ahead, Serafina reported, though she was looking at him rather than the displays. We'll emerge near the helix system, where Voss will be waiting, Marcus added. But he was no longer afraid. Whatever they faced now, they would face it together. The stellar whisper burst from the phantom nebula like a phoenix emerging from flame, her hull blazing with absorbed energy, and her systems operating at levels that defied conventional understanding. She was no longer just a ship. She was the physical embodiment of the bond between her crew. A weapon forged from love and trust and determination. Admiral Voss's fleet waited in perfect formation, confident in their overwhelming numerical advantage. They had no idea that the vessel approaching them was no longer the refugee they had been chasing. "This is Admiral Draken Voss," came the transmission. "Surrender now, Princess, and your human pet will live to see another day." Marcus and Serafina exchanged a look that communicated volumes without words. Then Serafina activated the CUM system, her voice carrying absolute authority. "This is Princess Serafina Kane, rightful heir to the Zephyrian throne, speaking from the bonded vessel Stellar Whisper. Admiral Voss, you have exactly one chance. To withdraw your forces and return to whatever hole you crawled out of." Voss's laughter echoed across the CUM. "You are outnumbered 3-1, girl. What possible threat could you pose?" The Stellar Whisper's weapons systems came online with a sound like singing crystal, her energy readings spiking to levels that made even the Admiral's sensors take notice. "Would you like to find out?" Serafina asked sweetly. Captain Nerissa Vale watched the tactical display from her hidden command post on Zephyr Prime's third moon, hardly daring to believe what her sensors were telling her. The energy signature approaching the planet was unmistakable. The Stellar Whisper, the legendary royal vessel that had vanished 50 years ago. "Ma'am," her communications officer reported. Barely containing his excitement, "We're receiving a transmission on the old royal frequencies. It's Princess Serafina." Nerissa felt her heart skip. She had been a lieutenant when the princess fled, young and idealistic enough to believe that someday the rightful heir would return to liberate their people. Decades of guerrilla warfare against Voss's occupation had hardened her, but never quite extinguished that hope. "Put it through," she ordered, straightening her worn uniform. The holographic display shimmered to life, revealing a figure that took Nerissa's breath away. Princess Serafina looked exactly as she had 50 years ago. But there was something different about her, bearing a confidence and power that spoke of trials overcome and bonds forged. "Captain Vale," Serafina said, recognizing her despite the years. "I have returned to reclaim what was stolen from our people." In space above the planet, the battle had already begun. Admiral Voss's 3 cruisers moved in perfect formation, their tactics honed by decades of conquest. But the Stellar Whisper danced between their attacks like liquid starlight, her enhanced systems making mockery of conventional warfare. Marcus felt the ship's joy as she finally expressed her true nature. It's no longer hiding, no longer running. She was free to be the weapon of liberation she had been designed to be. Through his bond with Serafina, he could sense her warrior's instincts guiding their movements, while his engineering knowledge pushed their systems beyond theoretical limits. "Impossible," Voss snarled, as his flagship's weapons passed harmlessly through space where the Stellar Whisper had been milliseconds before. "How are they moving like that, sir?" his tactical officer reported with growing panic. "Their power readings are off the charts. They're operating at 400% of baseline efficiency." The Stellar Whisper spun through a series of maneuvers that shouldn't have been possible, her hull singing with barely contained energy. Then she struck back, her weapons finding weak points in enemy shields with surgical precision. The first cruiser lost power and began drifting, its crew scrambling for escape pods. On Zephyr Prime's surface, the news spread like wildfire. The princess had returned. The resistance was rising. After 50 years of oppression, liberation was finally at hand. Captain Vale activated her deep cover network, sending coded signals to sleeper cells across the planet. "All units, this is Phoenix Command. Execute Operation Starburst. The princess has returned, and it's time to take back our world." Across the planet, Voss's occupation forces found themselves under attack from every direction. Supply depots exploded. Communication arrays went dark. Government buildings that had housed the Admiral's corrupt officials became battlegrounds as the people rose up in righteous fury. In space, the battle was turning decisively. The second cruiser broke formation, trying to flee, but the Stellar Whisper was on it like a hunting cat. Her bioorganic systems had learned to predict enemy movements, turning the engagement into less of a battle and more of an execution. Serafina Voice's voice crackled over the cum, no longer confident but desperate. You cannot win. Even if you destroy my fleet, I have armies on the surface. Your people will suffer for your defiance. Marcus felt Seraphine's cold fury through their bond and knew that the Admiral had just made a fatal mistake. Threatening her people was the one thing guaranteed to unleash her full wrath. Marcus, she said quietly, her voice carrying harmonics that made the ship's systems resonate. Take us down to the planet. It's time to end this. The stellar whisper dove through Zephyr Prime's atmosphere like a falling star, her passage visible. Across half the continent, she landed in the capital's central plaza with the grace of a dancer. Her hull still glowing from atmospheric entry, the crowds that gathered were massive millions of Zephyrians who had lived under Voss's boot for 50 years, finally seeing their rightful ruler return. When Serafina emerged from her ship, still wearing her form-fitting pilot suit, but radiating royal authority, the cheer that went up could be heard in orbit. My people, she began, her voice amplified by the ship's systems to reach every corner of the plaza. I have returned to you not as the frightened girl who fled 50 years ago, but as your queen bonded to a partner who has shown me that strength comes not from conquest, but from choosing to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Marcus stepped up beside her, still amazed by the turn his life had taken. Days ago, he'd been a failed engineer drinking away his sorrows. Now he stood before millions of aliens as the bonded partner of their queen. Together, Serafina continued, her hand finding his, we will rebuild our world. Not as it was, but as it should, be free, just, and open to all who would call it home. The remaining elements of Voss's forces, seeing which way the wind was blowing, began laying down their arms. Some fled off-world. Others threw themselves on the mercy of their former victims. Admiral Voss himself was found in his orbital command center, a broken man who had watched his empire crumble in a single day as the sun set over Zephyr Prime. Marcus stood on the Stellar Whisper's hull beside his wife, because that's what she was now, in every sense, that Matterdan watched fireworks bloom across the liberated capital. Any regrets? Serafina asked, leaning against his shoulder with casual intimacy that still made his heart race. Marcus thought about his old life, the failed business and bitter divorce, the loneliness and desperation that had driven him to spend his last credits on an impossible dream. Not a one, he said, pulling her closer. Though I have to ask what happens now. You're a queen, and I'm just a guy who fixes things. Serafina smiled, that radiant expression that had first captured his heart. In a cryogenic chamber, we build something beautiful together. A kingdom that needs rebuilding, a people who need healing. A marriage that defies every law of probability but somehow works. Above them, the Stellar Whisper's bioluminescent hull pulsed gently, the living ship content at last to be home with her bonded crew, and in the distance, Captain Nerissa Vale coordinated the transition to a new government, making plans for a future that finally held hope instead of just survival. It had started with a desperate gamble in a basement auction. House. Now it was the beginning of a love story that would be told across the galaxy for generations to come. The tale of the human engineer and the alien princess who found each other in the dark, between stars, and chose to build something extraordinary. Together, sometimes the best deals weren't about credits at all.